then taking a break to get the questions. Like I said, it's hard to focus on the chat and keep the flow going. Okay, let's start this. Get the slides going because we are 5 minutes in, and I'll start the screen share. All right, down and up we go. Here we go. How to become a developer. Join the tech gold rush. I imagine you people are here tonight thinking about a career change, potentially just starting into it, want to learn more. There's many reasons why you could be here. And I got 4 main sections to go through. A big part of it is it's not just going to be me talking tonight, in that what I've done is collected many other people's stories. There's my own story, which is a part of it too, in that I care about this topic because I've gone through career transition myself on multiple occasions. And so we'll cover people's stories first. I've got some good ones. And then after that, kind of a brief section of, so software engineering is a part of the tech community. There's lots of different tech jobs in software engineering, and then there's subcategories of software engineering. As you might imagine, it does get more complicated. But that whole ecosystem, there's a good community to it, a good feel. I would count myself as a part of the tech community now, and I was not in the past. And I like what I find here. People are friendly, and we'll get into the reasons why. Also, so a big part of understanding software engineering and what they do and how you might become one comes down to the topic and title of the full stack developer. Right? There's lots and lots of job titles of people out there who are hiring for full stack developers. Right? That's the software engineering job, of course. And at the end, so to become a software engineer, there is a bunch to learn. So how do you learn? What's the best way to learn? What are your options? What have people done? What are some resources to learn? Just kind of everything about like that. I'll put that at the end. And yeah, I did pick the title of Goldrush in that the whole tech field, it's a growing industry. There's money there, and that's a part of a career. It's part of why we work, so that's important. It's part of the story, but not the entire part of the story. Now, the first question, this is probably, hopefully you have some sort of answer for why do you want a change. That's definitely up to you and your individual story, and I can't answer it. The other questions here, I can partially, hopefully more fully answer. What the destination actually looks like, what you might actually learn, what those jobs are, just kind of the ecosystem of this tech community I keep mentioning. How do you get there? What do you learn? And then the stories. This is the big part where I personally need to see and learn about other people who have done something first, and then you can point to it and go, ah, I see that that person has made this career transition, or they've become a software developer from whatever they were doing before. I see that they did it, therefore I can potentially do it. We're just going to dive right into the stories. So Christina Veal went from a technical recruiter to software developer, and I'm going to share a bunch of stories because it helps you give you an idea, and this is important, where software developers come from all sorts of backgrounds. So wherever you're at, you can potentially become a software developer. It is a very broad pool of people, many of whom I would hope that you think they have a surprising background. They're definitely out there, and I hope some of these stories I got for you are a bit surprising to you, or hopefully even connected directly with your own story. So it's relevant that Christina is a technical recruiter and that she got to see, by helping hire software engineers, that not all of them had a computer science degree. Some do, many don't. There is enough demand in the field where degree requirements are hit or miss. Some companies want them, but more and more, the trend is towards that not being an issue. And because of certain characteristics in the community, people understand that a degree is not, it's a factor, it is not the factor at all, not even close. So in IT recruiting, she sees that there's low supply and high demand. That's part of the why where career change is a big deal. It's serious and good to learn about. That's why you're here. But software engineering in particular is a great option to look at because of this. Low supply, high demand. Makes sense. Colby Williams. All right, his background, YouTube gaming influencer to web developer. Interesting. And then here, just in his writing about his experience, and for all these people, I have links to essentially where they wrote about their experience in career transition and learning software development. All links in the slides, which I'm going to share probably early tomorrow with you guys. So he kind of asked some questions. These are the ones you might be asking, which we will partially answer tonight. What do you learn? Which coding language do you learn? And then kind of getting into more specifics. What about some of the other stuff? Big data, UI, data science, cybersecurity. I mean, there's a million options. People throw on all these things. And, well, you got to learn about a little bit about all of them to decide which is right for you. And so here, his direct quote. He sold his gaming PC and all of my YouTube recording equipment, deleted all my TV shows, and vowed to not play any games or watch TV until I landed a job. I love this quote because it gives an example of how valuable a career transition is, and it takes a bunch of effort, but it is worth the effort. And I want to give you a true picture of what people do to make this happen in their own life. And so for him, he eliminated a large number of distractions where if you really want to learn fast, then you got to find time somewhere in that. Potentially there's a lower supply of software engineers because it takes a bit of effort, it takes a bit of work. Nothing that's insurmountable, but not everyone does that. Nathan Musselman. This is a great story. His background, lots of different jobs. You can read it there. And then also for him specifically, no college degree. And all right, so here's we go get to Hack Reactor. I can explain that. Hack Reactor is the name of the 3-month-long coding boot camp that Galvanize runs. So it's Hack Reactor by Galvanize. Slightly confusing, but Hack Reactor's been around a long time. I believe it's since 2012, which, well, that's a long time in tech community terms, where lots of stuff, lots of technology cycles over in 1 or 2 years. So the fact that it has a history all the way back to 2012 is old. Only in this context, though, of course. So his advice from going from just, his background to a software developer, and I don't have it here, but he works in Boulder. That was a part of his story, Boulder, Colorado. So he says, go for it. The more you put into it, the more you will get out of it. It is one of the hardest things I've done, and easily the most rewarding. This topic it's fun in a sense, but it's also serious, which is why I'm glad you're here, and why I am putting in my best effort to communicate all these nuances of this track, what there is to learn, what people have to do to make it happen. It is hard work, but so software engineering, a good part of it that he's getting to in the code here is it's linear in that if you make a month of efforts at whatever pace you're at towards learning software engineering, which is more than just learning to code, I'll explain that more later. If you put a month of effort in, you get results, and you can see that. There's always roadblocks along the way and things you have to overcome, learning to code is linear. It's not something like, what would be, that's the example I came up with. It's not like learning to play a sport or basketball or something like that, where things like, if you're not really tall, you might have less of a chance to succeed in playing basketball. It is not so much like that. The people you see that succeed in software engineering are from a very broad background, like I keep saying. And it's just a matter of consistent effort and perseverance to learn the topic, and that gets people to the destination. Let's keep going. Jean-Pierre Bertil went from power meter manufacturing company to software developer. And again, so he's also a Hack Reactor graduate. So if you notice, not all these stories have the boot camp path. That's where I do want to make this clear in that, yes, I work for Galvanize, and my coworkers put on the Hack Reactor program in lots of different campuses around the country and online. The point is, whatever path you end up taking and learning to code and becoming a software engineer, that's great. I am here and I want you to succeed. And I do believe there's lots of info here that will help you. Let's keep going. So he is a graduate of the bootcamp program. One way to do it. And here, I'm making a point of citing first software developer at the company he ended up working for, in that a boot camp does prepare you a lot very quickly. Where at the end, you're ready to go. You've crossed a certain threshold and you have become employable. Because that's the key point where to become a software engineer, it's not so much learning this and that topic, or I know how a bit of code, or I know about this technology. You have to reach a point where you become employable to companies in the real world, where there's a tech recruiter out there that will sit down with you for 2 or 3 interviews perhaps, and then hire you. You have to get to that level. And again, just for him also, you hear this all the time. Learning to code is rewarding. It's intimidating at first, which is true. You should just work at it. It's that consistent effort I talked about. You'll figure it out, and frankly, it'll become second nature. That's very true. In a situation where you work full-time on something, if you work full-time for a whole week on a single problem, you will have progress and you will know more by the end of the week. Here's another example. So, also a Hack Reactor grad, but I had a video on this one. It's hard to show videos on Zoom, so I won't show that. Plus, it's not as fun to show videos. But when I do share the slides with everybody, these slides have links throughout that you can click on for all these cool resources. I'm all about sharing resources. Because there's so many resources out there, it's a trouble to find the right ones. Like there's an ocean of stuff, so the trouble is, what do you find? And I put in some of the effort to collect a good selection of what you might need to know. But yeah, Angie's background, a teacher. And this actually works great, where it is very helpful to have educational and presentation and communication skills as a software engineer. In that, well, one, there's the job search process, which is all about explaining yourself and communicating well and presenting yourself as someone who is hireable and will put in good work, but also who is just someone that's good to work with, whatever that means. Fun, just easy to communicate with, interesting. All that comes from your background, potentially. Whatever it may be. Keep going. Me. A bit more about myself. I'd say I've gone through a few different big career transitions, but sometime in 2019 I was definitely ready to make a change from CNC manufacturing. I worked at a tech services company. Yeah, and just kind of with that engineering/manufacturing background, I picked data science specifically, different than software engineering, but again, it's in that whole tech community realm. And for me, data scientist was the right track to pursue. I like Excel spreadsheets and numbers, and I was talking a bit right at the beginning before I really got started about I like communicating well, and in data science, it's a challenge to communicate. Like, it's a communication discipline. Using data to communicate something that's complicated or unintuitive, and if you can visualize that well and pick the right numbers, that's great stuff. I like that. All right, let's do, what advice would I give? Now, normally I don't think about the next 10 years of my life. That's not a everyday occurrence, at least for me, and I don't gather that it's every day for me. But when you do think about that, and then also specifically in relation to work and career and income, all that stuff, it's very important things. These are big parts of all of our lives. So where you're at, you've got to evaluate where you're at currently. And like for me, I chose to make a transition because that's where it made sense. And it set things up to be in a good place where I could commit to something. And here, this is a big one where I did like my coworkers at my past company, but I was hoping to have even better coworkers. Like, that's just a small part of it. But there's all those little things that you have to add up yourself to decide on whether you're going to make a big change. Thankfully, a big change is possible and doable. We'll keep going to explain why. First break. All right, bunch of stories we covered. And decent time, not too bad. Next section's pretty short, and then we'll do a quick break for some questions. I'll take a drink of water or something. But, right, so more on the tech community. Why does this matter, and why? I've already said that the community is potentially different than the work community you may be a part of now or not a part of. So there's one reason for that. And that reason is because everything changes fast in tech and in software, it's a high learning environment. People are learning on the job. Even someone who's been in software development for 5 to 10 years, they end up having to learn new things every year. Of course, the amount of things you can learn is endless, absolutely endless. No one engineer knows every piece of technology or every coding language, which is a nice thing that keeps you feel interesting. Having something new to learn, that's generally a pretty good thing for work and career. Keeps the grass green, you could say. And yeah, so this learning atmosphere is what's at the core of it. Because if you have to always be learning, that keeps you always in mind of beginners, because beginners are learning, and you know that you are at that point also. So it can't always be the case, but for many in the field, people are understanding of beginners. Not true across the board, but generally speaking, this is true. And it's because of this learning environment. So how that ends up playing out, here, let's get to a specific example. The Galvanize Tech Community Slack channel, right? There's a Slack channel that Galvanize helps run, just a chat channel, just kind of like Discord if you haven't used Slack before. And on there, there's people at various levels who are all learning to code. Some right at the beginning, some are close to entering a boot camp, all different stages, and there's a section on kind of preparing and learning to code. People are sharing bits of code, helping each other out on specific problems. And also, you just get to hear the general story of everyone, where they're at currently, where they want to go, some of their background. The more stories you hear, the more inspired you get. That's true for me. That's true for many other people. I hope it's true for you. Let's do another specific example. So Austin Trackaberry and his experience learning software and getting into coding. This gets into the community part in that he recommends tech meetups. Just like you're here tonight at an event, just any kind of meetup group you can go to. And nowadays, there's endless possibilities because so much is all on Zoom. In person is nice for meeting people too, but you can do it on Zoom. Works great. And yeah, the networking part, this is why this is important. So this comes into later on. So at the beginning, there is a bunch of learning to code, but eventually you are job searching, if that's the track you want to be on. And the job search is just as much of a challenge as learning to code. I care about this topic of career change and providing resources because finding jobs can be difficult. I've had some difficult times that I've gone through. It's never easy, but when you get the right resources and find a motivation wherever you can find it, you get through it. And so that can be from meetups, where jobs, all right, this is a big one. The current state of finding jobs I see right now, it's applications to an online, you found a job posted on a job board, you apply to it. Some people find jobs that way, but the majority of the time, and especially breaking into a new industry and career change, it is all about networking. So that's people you meet on Zoom, people you connect with on LinkedIn. It's so important, and you can never start too early, right? Absolutely never. One, you find ways to learn faster or things you should know that you didn't know about before. But then really it comes down to job networking. It's a big one. Yeah, here. Take a break and check the questions. Take a drink of water. All right. Interesting. So Dave asks, what type of companies do you think are best for older software engineers? Yeah, good question. Okay, let's answer that one. Companies for older software engineers. So in breaking into software engineering and software development, here we go. If you're an older engineer or want to transition, and the people, so some of the stories that I've shared already were of people in their 30s to 40s, and it can be done, of course, later than that also. But kind of having any sort of past career experience is absolutely a positive. So a big one is leveraging your past experience. Later on, I'll get to a point in the slide where even if your past industry experience is not per se tech or software specific, I do believe here in the year 2021 that all companies that are going to succeed and not disappear are in effect tech companies, where in some part of the business or another, whether it's real estate, finance, or anything like that, technology has to be leveraged, because if your company isn't doing it, there's some other company that's going to leverage technology and be more efficient or connect with customers better, and they're going to thrive. So it's companies related to your background. That's the answer there. Let's do another one. Interesting. Here's this one. This is a stumper. Do you know of any companies where software engineers work in an office with 4 walls and a door rather than an open office or a cubicle? Oh, actually, no. I just thought of an answer. I can't think of an office space that I know of with 4 walls and a door for everyone's offices, but probably right at this very moment, this is a total guess. Let's just say 95% of software engineers are working from home right now. And that number will not go down to 0 when things potentially blow over with the current lockdown stuff. Where, as a software engineer, most of the time your office is your own home or apartment with 4 walls and a door. There we go. That's the answer. Yeah, question about Nathan Musselman. He did go through Hack Reactor. Let's see, let's go through all these. Okay. How do you overcome a coding challenge? Coding challenges. That's one where it's straight up practice. I'd say narrow in on the specific topics that you're having trouble with and put in the time. And at the end of the day, coming over or getting over a problem is you put the time into it, ask specific questions, make the right Google searches. Everyone learns from Google. That's how you get over a coding challenge. Here's another question. Yeah, just about the PowerPoint. Yes, I will be mailing out the PowerPoint to attendees. I intend to send the email out tomorrow. Tomorrow's a reasonably non-busy day, so I should be able to get to it. Let's keep going. One about Galvanize's career support. Galvanize states they have 6 months career support. This is true. Where, let's see. I'm not understanding the second half of the question. But yeah, part of the boot camp comes with career services, which is good stuff. In that searching for a job alone is hard. Searching for a job with support from others is better, simply stated. How's the work-life balance of a software engineer? It depends on which company you're working for. I think it's quite good in that software engineers very often have the choice to work from home, and that also most of the time comes with it certain flexibility about working hours, where let's say you don't get as much done as you want to during the week while you're working from home, so you just get a bit more done on the weekend. An important point, though, is software developers work in teams, so there is collaboration. That does happen during the week. Here's a question. What's harder, data science, cybersecurity, or software development? Good question. Those are options that are out there for career transitions. I would actually say the picture I get is software development, that general career track. First of all, it gets recommended the most because it has the highest number of jobs compared to the other two that were mentioned there. And the most people can go for it. I'd say data science, it ends up being people with narrower backgrounds go into data science, whereas a very wide variety of backgrounds of people get into software development. Let's see, another one. A bunch of questions. This is fun. Question about someone who's an engineering project manager. Would I need to get into IT project management? First of all, that's definitely excellent a background to have, in that with picking up coding and the software development career track, a potential track for someone like you would be, there's kind of always that entry level where at the entry level, yeah, you're just a software developer working with a team, with a company on some projects, and you get stuff done. But I'd say many people transition within a year or 2 or 3, and software engineers have team managers. So if you have project manager experience, you'd very easily slip into managing a software product or a software engineering team. That makes sense to me. A question about time frame. I'll get to that in a bit. Successful graduates of a coding bootcamp. There would not be extra work after it. That was the question. Is there extra work or certificates? No. The next step after a boot camp is finding a job, and while you search for the job, a good thing to do is work on a personal project And that's specifically for your resume, because when you're in an interview, you want something cool to talk about, like a project you've been working on for a month that shows your good work and shows that you can code. Yeah, LinkedIn, definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I should be pretty searchable and easy to find. Jim Frank in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Okay, we did a bunch of questions. Let's keep going. Check the chat real quick. Bunch of questions. There's one about, do you need coding knowledge before attending a boot camp? Yes. I'll cover a bunch more and hopefully answer some of these questions. It is possible to apply for a job on Indeed and get it. That was a question. I would say the odds are extremely low. The number of people who apply to those is astronomical. The way to get interviews, which is actually how you get jobs, is with connections, networking. I wish you could just apply. It makes sense to me that you should be able to do it that way, but I have learned enough from hiring managers, technical recruiters, that most of the time it's just not the way it happens. And thankfully, you don't have to know someone in advance. You can drum up networking. Lots of people do it. It's very possible. All right. Full stack developer. Let's get into where learning to code. What does that mean? You may have heard the phrase, but learning to code and then being employable, those are two different things. Here we go. So on this graphic here, learning to code means having software skills where you can code to tie together different pieces of they're called frameworks. That's one thing to call them, but there's a whole bunch of different things. Where this is what it means to learn to code. Learning to code means being a full stack developer. That's an actual job title, the full stack developer. So there's different categories. Front end, that's essentially user interface. A web app is a front end. An app on your phone is the front end. It's where the user is interfacing with the technology. That's done with things like JavaScript, HTML, all that good stuff. And in the lower left, you'll see I made an extra note of React.js and React Native. Those are two frameworks that Facebook has, and they're open source. They're extremely popular right now. Lots of people learn those, and there's lots of jobs and job descriptions that specifically reference React. It's also, lots of people use it. All right, now to explain the back end. That's anything behind the front of the interface of an app or a website or whatever piece of code and technology that is. And the back end will tie an interface to the databases, where all of the data has to get stored somewhere. There's a whole other process for that. And then also, there's a whole other set of technologies that's not on this graphic, but essentially DevOps of. So there's the cloud, and the cloud is things like Amazon Web Services, AWS, where you can spin up a server. And to do that, that's a whole other set of knowledge. And a full stack developer does know at least some of that. A full stack developer means a wide variety of different things. What you actually end up doing is specific to whatever company you end up at. And I have an arrow there to version control section. This is important, where learning to code, you initially see it as something that you do individually on your own. But in a job position, for most people, it is a group endeavor. You're in a team that is working on a product, and you're working together. And so to collaborate a group of people and code, there's a bunch of tools, which are those version control tools, the big one being Git and GitHub, that a hiring manager wants to see that you have used those, because teaching it is actually rather challenging. It's one where it's nothing too complex. It's just a bit of hard work to get to know it. And that's not something a hiring manager wants to have to think about. They want to see that you have experience in that category, and then you'll be good. But yeah, this is what learning to code means. It's tying all this stuff together, where you don't write every single line of code. Software engineering is not that. Software engineering is orchestrating all of these tools in front of you into a product of some sort, a business that's useful, something that does something that people want. Here, let's get to some more specifics. Here, this is the number just pulled off the Galvanize website of graduates out of the program. So entry level, although really graduates are probably one step above the very basic entry level. I'll kind of explain that more a little bit. But this starts to give you a ballpark number of salary ranges, which is of course why this is a gold rush, and not just the whole tech field and any jobs and companies associated with it. All this stuff is growing, and it'll keep growing. The whole field has grown immensely in the last 10 years. It's got decades to go. You're not too late or anything like that. I've heard that before, where it feels like, man, I should have done this 5 years ago. That doesn't matter at all. Now's the right time. Everything's still growing. None of these numbers will go down. Let's keep going. Right, here we get into some fun data. And this is pulled from the HackerRank Skills Report. So a bunch of developers, existing developers, and more importantly, hiring managers filled out the HackerRank survey. HackerRank helps connect hopeful software engineers with hiring managers. They kind of have a learning platform where on their website you can show off your coding skills, and hiring managers can take a look at people who are showcasing their skills and potentially reach out to them for jobs. Anyways, they have an excellent report, which is, I very much want to cite them because they did a bunch of work to pull all this data together. Okay, so this graph. I got the arrow there pointing to the important part, where the 5 bars are just different company sizes. Well, I guess the last one, though, is just all of them aggregated together. But here, this is the question asked to those hiring managers. What's the most important role you're looking to fill in 2020? So there are those categories again. So some software engineers are front-end developers, back-end developers. This one's got data science throws in there. DevOps engineer is essentially people who run the cloud servers. That's one way to think about it. There's more to it than that, but that's a one-sentence description. But there, full stack developer, that is the most common role that hiring managers are looking to fill in 2020, and that trend won't change. That's just why, that's the one I'm talking about with you today. It's the most common one. With your own personal journey, you might go on a slightly different track. Maybe you end up really liking the database and the back-end side of software management, and you don't want to have to mess with user interfaces or something like that, right? That could be a career track. Again, here we go. Arrow pointing to the important part. This answers that question that's quite common of what programming language should I learn? An easy recommendation, if you don't have any other past experience, is JavaScript. And this is because JavaScript is the code that runs on your web browser. So any web app, which is, your finance, banking websites, Google, all sorts of stuff. Any website that does anything interesting is effectively a web app. It runs on JavaScript. So that's huge front end, but you can also run back end on it. And so that just means a huge number of the jobs involve JavaScript. I myself, I know Python. Python's great. It's a good, easy language to learn. I like the look of it, which matters to me. Just kind of a style thing. Python is, it gets used a bunch in data science. That's probably one of the reasons why it's more popular, because data science is more recent and new, but it's still growing. Not as much as just the general field of software engineering, though. Let's keep going. This is just data. Here we go. Let's go into the frameworks again. And this is why I mentioned React on that other slide with the different frameworks and technologies. So of developers in 2020, very recently, React is the one that everyone wants to learn, if they don't know it already and are working on it. And it's one of those things, these frameworks, they're effectively they're a toolbox, a tool bench at which software engineers make things. And so if you have a better set of tools and a better tool bench, it's easier to make what you want to make. And so when it comes out that's popular, well, it rises. Things like, I know Ruby on Rails is one where it's a bit older, just less popular now. I've not used it myself, but I've heard mixed opinions on it, things like that. Spark is one I know about in that it gets used in data science tasks, kind of on the back end and database side. But these are all those different things where, based on a particular job or company, they will cite whatever tool they use. It's totally varied. You can't really plan on which one it is, but as long as you know one or two to start, then you can show that you're a good learner. You can end up getting hired for a framework that you don't particularly know that day. But given 1 or 2 weeks, you'd essentially be up to speed. If you can prove that to a hiring manager, you're good to go. Let's just do some more salary numbers, because it does vary by city and region. And here's a qualification in that. So out of a coding boot camp, it's less than 50%, but a good percentage do get 6-figure job offers straight out of the coding boot camps, things like HackerActor. And that's one. Not all coding boot camps are the same. That's an entirely different topic. So 6-figure salaries out of a boot camp are possible, not in the majority. Again, it depends on your own background and the amount of work and interview skill that you have. That'd be a big one. But like you can see, I had that other slide with the 91,000 as an average out of Galvanize. So a range that's highly realistic for the majority of people is 80 to 100K. And then these numbers like this is, I don't know, after 3 years of experience, 2 years of experience, the averages are kind of actually deceiving. Now, I had to go to a different survey for this bit of data, State of JavaScript 2020 survey, but I did want to break apart the sectors. This is where your background comes into the play potentially, where if you have a finance background, well, a large number of software engineers get hired into fintech and software finance companies. Where I'm at in Dallas, this is why I talk about that one, because Dallas has a good presence of companies in fintech and financial advising, and therefore there are a large number of software engineers who work for those fintech and financial advisory companies in Dallas. That's just a cool breakdown. And yeah, you can see it does break down by industry quite a bit. Again, all companies are tech companies, right? Yeah, let's see, just kind of some overview of that stuff. Computer code is a language. That's why you're having to learn it. And it's the language of business now because everything is in part tangentially related to tech. Sure, that's arguable, but it becomes more and more true every day. And yeah, lots of software engineering is Googling solutions and using other people's code. Everyone does this. That's how it works. You need to know how to do it yourself. But to get things done, the amount of resources out there is just immense. Like that's, again, where the tech community comes into play. All right, the learning part. Let's keep going into that. I want to go quickly through these last few minutes and have some time for more questions. Here's a timeline. This is a big one. I would say this covers most people that I've seen going into software engineering. This is very realistic, where anywhere from 1 to 5 months, you're potentially doing something like a few nights a week, getting up to speed on coding basics, right? relatively low investment. And here's a big one. This is also where you determine if this track is right for you. Just at a casual level, watching videos or doing simple coding problems online, you figure out if this is something you want to do before you commit to anything drastic, right? You can just do that by working 3 nights a week for 2 hours. Let's call that 6 hours. And you do that for a while, and that's how you can get basics covered. To accelerate things and make it so that you can actually have experience working with other people, and not just learning the code, but learning the whole full tech stack, that's really where something like a boot camp can come into play. Not necessarily, but it's potentially harder without it. And for something like that, there's pre-course where potentially for a month, you are definitely upping the amount of commitment, where if you're working still, it's all your free time. Or if not working, you can really start getting committed to the learning track. And a boot camp is full time. You heard some of these stories of other people where you probably will have to eliminate distractions from your life to get it done. But it's worth it. And again, this is one of these things where it's life-changing. It affects the trajectory of who you are and where you will be over the next 10 years and beyond. And you do got to remember what happens after it. So yeah, the approximate number of people who get jobs within 6 months, it's about 85%. That was a very important number for me that I really wanted to hear when doing a big transition. Is I've been through long job searches before where some people do find a job within 1 month. That is not the majority. The majority come within 2 to 6 months, right? That stuff can just take time. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that at all. It's just as difficult and potentially more mentally difficult than the boot camp itself. The boot camp is structured and you're just learning the code, very linear. The job search is challenging. Here's someone else's learning timeline. So the part I circled is the part where they ended up going to a coding boot camp. So looks like they went to hacker school in 2013. So a while ago, and I don't have any experience with hacker school. I don't know if they still exist at all. But it is true that the speed of learning in a boot camp is straight up. Like you learn more in a boot camp than you do in working as a software engineer. Like if you've gotten to that point. Yeah, again, this stuff is life-changing, which is why it's nice that you guys are here and taking the time to learn this. So that community, and here I mentioned this where to me it was important, where I saw an opportunity to learn with interesting people, likable people, and also have coworkers who were that too. I liked my past coworkers, but I like my current coworkers even more. That's how it worked out for me, and potentially that way for other people also. That fast pace of the boot camp is a feature, not a bug, in that the work environment that people go into is fast paced. Full-time work, that's what it is. Where ideally you're getting stuff done within the first week or two, and you want it to drag on the team that you're with. That's where the boot camp, that fast-paced feature is good, because just doing stuff a few nights a week, part-time, that doesn't capture the speed and the intensity of the actual career trajectory of software engineering. And just like a roller coaster, a big change like this in your life is frightening, and it's supposed to be that way. And it's why not everyone does it. But again, I think it's worth it. Many other people say it's worth it. Don't just take my word for it. There's others that say this as well. There's so many challenges, but the challenges everyone faces, well, you get to go through it with other people, because there is that community. Here's one. The boot camps do cost money, but that should, in my opinion, be a non-factor, because the ways to pay for it are quite straightforward and excellent. This is kind of a side tangent, but the way education is funded is potentially changing, and it's because of things like income share agreements, where you don't have to pay for the boot camp essentially until after you've found employment, right? If these boot camps didn't work, there would not be such agreements. And to learn more about that, well, I got the link there, and I'll share the slides, or just search for Galvanize's website and the funding page or whatever. Also, you can just think of it as this way, where for most people going on this track, they end up increasing their pay by so much that they pay off the boot camp in less than a year. That is many people's story. This is also just, I threw some random points in this slide, but grad school compared to a coding boot camp, again, my opinion, don't take my word for it. You research it yourself to confirm everything I'm saying. But practically speaking, if you're just interested in good career results, practically gaining the skills to be a software engineer, a boot camp does it better than something like grad school, where that's more focused and potentially less practical and targeted on a job in the workforce. Another way to think of that 3 months boot camp, I say it's super fast-paced learning because effectively it's 2 to 3 years of software engineering work experience, i.e., the jobs boot camp graduates look for are the jobs that say, oh, this job, it needs 2 to 3 years of work experience. Well, I know for a fact, and I definitely confirm this, that those jobs go to entry-level people oftentimes, and it's become from that networking. It's all about getting the interview and then convincing the hiring manager that you can do the work. And when you have projects that you've completed and can show on your GitHub and talk about them well, you know the lingo, then you're good to go. Let's bring in one more story from somebody else. And so Daniel Hunter, his learning to code experience, he had some things that he would say you should look out for. Lessons learned, things to avoid or not do from his perspective. So he says, don't learn in secret, don't do it alone, ask questions. There's a million acronyms. Acronyms are fun. You just got to ask and learn them, look them up. No one knows all of them. And then this is a cool one that he mentions, is teaching. In that you know that you learned something when you are able to teach it to others. Again, that's where the community comes into play, where you can learn from others, and also you can send that help back to other people. It just shows and confirms that you do have the skills. In him, he wrote about what he was learning. Here's a challenge. You should maybe not, you don't need to write about your journey, but I put out an example timeline. You can make your own timeline. Do that today, do that tomorrow, whatever it is. It'll help you stay accountable to what you want to achieve. Almost done. Learning to code, you will at times feel overwhelmed, and 100% of people feel that. Career change, learning to code, these are big things. Naturally, it's frightening. Naturally, you feel overwhelmed. That's a part of the process. There's no wrong way to get started because everyone's track ends up looking differently. You just start somewhere, whether it's JavaScript videos. Maybe you can listen to a video or watch a video, or whether it's the actual online coding problems, or whatever it may be. Just get started wherever it is. And I have some more resources at the end of specifically what you can actually click on to get those resources. All right. Summarizing. Find stories, pay attention to those because that's how you stay inspired and you stay motivated. Don't do it alone, both in job search, in learning, and in just everything about it. Team up with other people who are on this journey with you. The full stack developer means learning to code. right? There's a lot to it. I tried to communicate as best as possible some of the nuances of it, just to give you the understanding, not that you can learn all of this in one evening, but there's much to learn. So it's not like it's something that happens in 3 months, but there are 100% for sure people's stories where they do this transition in less than a year. I'd say that's most people's goals. 8 months to a year. That's a good goal to have for the timeline. And just a big one that I do for myself and I recommend for others is the way this happens is, practically speaking, you got to eliminate some distractions. Whatever that is for you, you get to figure it out. Right. These are some of the resources I got. Again, I am sharing these slides in my email tomorrow. It is 6:30, so if you have to go, great. But I'll just try and wrap up some here and get to a few more questions for a few minutes. I don't need to leave just this minute. And also links to all the different articles and content and sources I used for all this material that you've seen here. Again, this is not just me speaking. It's all these people. It's Christina and Colby and John and Julia and Daniel. All right, I'll leave it here and dive into questions. Oh, welcome. What do we got? I'm going to check chat first, and then I'm going to check the Q&A box. Software analyst. That just sounds like an alternate title to a software engineer. Yeah, so full stack developer, software engineer, software developer. It's messy out there in how jobs are listed. All these titles are somewhat different. At the end of the day, each company is unique, and each team that you work with is specific to that team and the personality of who's leading it. So things like difference between the title of software analyst and developer, maybe it means a little bit, but most of the time it's you just have to look at the details. There's a question. What is your advice for entering a boot camp, feeling unprepared, and discerning the difference between imposter syndrome and not knowing what you don't know, especially learning topics at a very high, fast-paced speed, I assume, with little to no time to process concepts? Yeah, there are kind of the overarching, so there's learning to code, and then there's thinking like a software developer. I believe that kind of going through a process of maybe a slower paced, going through the basics of coding, comboed with, so there's kind of the how to think like a software developer. This is where something like, and I know Harvard does it, where Harvard and some of the universities have free online software classes, and those teach the concepts and kind of some of the thought patterns behind coding real well, available for free. I don't have those as a resource. Not everyone's interested in those. In that, the day-to-day job of a software developer, they don't think about that too much, but it is something that's probably in their background. Someone asking the crowd questions. All right, dive into these questions. Let's see. Software analyst question, okay. There's a question about part-time boot camps and full-time boot camps. There are options for part-time boot camps between, instead of doing 3 months full-time, this is less common, but it's an option for, I forget how long it is. It's either 6 to 9 months, and you do things like work all weekend long plus some weeknights. And that's one thing I've heard. The success rates are the same, But I think everything's more drawn out. Like finding a job is more drawn out. The learning process is more drawn out. At the end of the day, though, the material that's covered is the same. Yeah, question about which language to use. Start with JavaScript, potentially, and read up on yourself if you want to potentially look into something different than JavaScript. But if you're just going based on higher ability, JavaScript's the place to start. It is kind of that simple. It seems like it might be more complicated than that, but it isn't. Here's a great question from Dave. How important is it to have practical projects in your portfolio rather than academic projects? I think that's super important. I haven't myself hired software developers, but you can easily put yourself in the position of what would I look for when hiring a software developer? I think projects are a perfect showcase of talent and ability and understanding of what's important. When you do a project, you show that you have skills beyond just book knowledge. You show that you can make something. And a full stack developer out of a boot camp, you can make essentially intermediate level basic web apps and phone apps on your own, where part of the boot camp is projects. Let's say you work with 4 or 5 people for a week or 2, and at the end of it, you've got a basic web app or phone app that does whatever simple task you came up with, and it's showcasing just making something from start to finish, where it's got a user interface, it's got a database where it's storing whatever data it is. There's a great example I can think of where a team of about 4 people in a week made an app that tracks roommate chores. So let's say you got a house with a bunch of different roommates. How do you keep track of all the chores people are responsible for? Where if you don't keep track, well, suddenly there's a pile of dishes. And they made a fun app that has different roommates, so it's got users effectively and timelines for assigning dates of who does what when. To make a tool like that, that's a bunch of software engineering work. I'm surprised I didn't see it till now. The question of, is Hack Reactor still doing on-site boot camps in all locations despite the pandemic? No. Since a year ago, everything has been fully online. It's a common question, very understandable, of when will boot camps go back to being in person at the various campuses across the country? That's unknown. I don't personally get to decide that. I'm not in conversations about that. I, of course, have just a guess, which is unofficial, anything like that. To me, it seems like with vaccines rolling out, a lot will be able to go back to normal in July, the second half of the year. Give the rollout a few more months to roll out, but then things are looking good. And yeah, I'd say like here where I'm at in Dallas, things are pretty casual. Everyone's got a handle on how things are. Everyone does things safely. But yeah, it'll go back to in-person eventually. Let's see, other questions. Just one about, any thoughts about blockchain and career prospects? Right, so blockchain is a specific subset of software engineering. So here's the thing. So lots of the jobs, if you just go search on the job boards for full stack software developer, it's not going to be a majority of the jobs that cite blockchain, right? But if it is something that you're personally interested in, you can make that track work, where that is a growing subset of software development. It's a specific technology that you can learn. And I see that growing, where more mainstream companies will adapt to that. Here's something that's interesting I've found just in the business/tech world in general. When a new technology comes along, it actually takes a very long time for it to be implemented in legacy businesses on the scale of 10 years, where I know this specifically because I've got knowledge in data science. Data science tools and technology from 10 years is just now being implemented in many companies. It's essentially technology that's slightly outdated, but because many business environments are so slow, that's just the way of things, it's just happening now. So things like blockchain, it'll keep rolling out, but business takes a while, and that's just the whole business nature of things. How many percentages hired through Indeed? Single-digit percentages, low. That's my opinion on it. What percent are hired through networking? Greater than 50%. I believe it's something like that. And more specifically, it's about getting the interview, right? That's what it means to get the job. Applying to a job, sadly, it means very little. It's all about the interview and getting that interview, whether through recruiters or through the hiring managers at specific companies. There's that whole ecosystem. And once you set off on this track, you learn more about that as you go along. I can help give you a picture now, but that's something that I've been immersed in for a long time. Very much immersed in for well over a year, and something I've thought on and off about for an extremely long time. Here's a question. Should I wait until I'm ready to make a career change to attend a boot camp? It's an interesting question. There is a certain subset of people that just want to learn, and a boot camp is a fun place to do that. You meet and learn with cool people. Most people are there to switch up their career, and the fact that it's just 3 months long, they're about doing it quickly. You compare that, the alternatives are things that take much longer, either doing it on your own, which is possible but difficult, and things like a computer science degree or some sort of grad degree in the field. Those things take years, right? And a boot camp is 3 months, but then actually, that timeline I showed you, think of it more as 9 months to a year. That's the actual timeline. But that includes absolutely everything, kind of the prep basic work and the job search on the other end. Here's a question. Quite a few coding boot camps teach Ruby on Rails. Ruby on Rails is it's been around longer, and that's the thing. If you work for a company that uses it or want to be hired by a company that uses it, it's just fine to learn Ruby on Rails. And the skills you learn in a framework like that absolutely apply to all the other frameworks. They all are overlapping, where once you've learned to code one language or one framework, it's a little bit like you've learned them all. I mean, that's the thing. Each and every one of these has all the little details that end up slowing you down if you aren't working with them on a regular basis. And that's the part where you have to get up to speed with. How is Dallas job market for IT? So, Dallas is just a big city. I like talking about this because, of course, I'm in Dallas. But here's a fun fact. So for tech jobs, that's a broad category where software development is a large part of the category. Many people think of Austin in Texas as a tech hub, and it is. Lots of tech companies are in Austin. Yet, Dallas creates more tech jobs. Again, that's more than just software development. But just simply because Dallas is so big, and there are so many companies here, and in general, Texas is growing, Dallas creates large numbers of tech jobs. It's not a tech hub, but like I said earlier, all major cities are now tech hubs. Like we're in 2021 here. Yeah, so a question kind of comparing the full-time boot camp to a part-time boot camp. I recommend the full-time work. I just do it. That's my opinion on it. A question about me. Did I do the data science immersive at Galvanize? Yes, I went through the data science bootcamp / immersive at Galvanize. That is how I got into the field. And so I'm in this position also, but again, I'm excited about communication, and that's absolutely what I'm doing now. So I'm very happy to be where I've ended up, and I like my coworkers, and it's great. Just another happy story to go along with all the others that we've talked about today. So when learning coding languages, do you focus on one language or more? At the beginning, probably just focus on one language. That's the easy answer. I'll keep going quick. I want to wrap this up. In terms of programming skill, how do you know when you are ready for a professional full-stack position? Here, I'll cite the projects for that. And that you're ready when you can make an app, or a web app or a phone app, either on your own or in a small group, and kind of do it in one. You don't need to know all the tools to make that possible, but let's say you want to make a simple app, and for the user interface, you use React, and you hook it up to a simple database, and you throw it up on one of the free Amazon Web Services servers, and you do all that, and you can talk about it, you can showcase it, you can share the code if need be, which is also a thing. Some hiring managers like to see clean code. So here's a question. Do you think the published average salaries are low? What multiplier would you use to make it real for someone with 5 years of experience? 5 years of experience is absolutely 6 figures. And that's again where it varies by city, it varies by company, but ballpark is 5 years of experience is absolutely in the 6-figure range. Yeah, there's more stories I could go into, but I'll keep going. Any questions about income share agreement? I will have to point you to the website. There is. Check out the website for the income share agreement details. And just ask more questions. We got other events, info sessions about this stuff. We want to make it so all your questions get answered. Big changes like this in your life you need a lot of data to make a lot of different questions. There's a lot to know. It doesn't take one day. Is Hack Reactor Remote available for European students? Yeah, as I understand it, people outside of the US do our boot camps online. How can someone transition from oilfield industry into cybersecurity? Cybersecurity, that's the track. So it's tangentially related to software engineering, but for any kind of transition out of oilfield industry, that's one where people do it. This is again back to data science, but one of the people I went through the immersive with for a data science track, and whether you do cybersecurity or data science or software engineering, as far as career change goes, they end up looking the same, where you learn something, and then you show to hiring managers that prove that you've learned something and are useful and employable. Becoming employable, that's the whole goal. And so yes, it's absolutely possible for an oil field industry background in that someone who went through the cohort with me was doing just exactly that. They'd done oil industry work, I don't know, maybe 8 years, and they were just done with it. And so they were going to make a transition. That was their reason. People do it. What training, courses, connections would you expect for a career path? Again, like I got the resources here. Boot camp's a track. Self-learning's a track. Everyone's journey does look different. Like you look at everyone's backgrounds on LinkedIn. I highly recommend using it if you're not already doing it. That is part of finding a job. That's just how it works, where if there's 10 applicants to a position, 9 out of 10 are going to have LinkedIn, and it's probably one of those 9 that are getting hired. There's no reason not to use it. How important do you think certifications are for software engineers? So a full stack engineer, I'd say that track certifications are not needed. This is again in particular to each track where data science they're not needed. Things like cybersecurity, which I'm less knowledgeable about it, but my understanding is cybersecurity, these certifications are a good way to go. Like that can real quickly show and prove that you're employable. Also, there's kind of a whole category of DevOps, essentially running the servers. I do believe there's certifications in that career track. And yeah, some of the tracks have certifications, some don't. A full stack developer may or may not have any certifications. How do you know if you actually have a flair for it? You just try it. You do the basic coding exercises, watch some videos, listen to other people's stories. Thankfully, the community is nice, so there's many, many quality YouTube videos out there of just people talking about their experience. There's the stories I've presented to you today, but you can find so many more. So many more. All right. That was the questions in that section. For anyone that's giving thanks, thank you very much. I'm glad you're here. Definitely, I'm getting a bit hungry. I hope if you haven't eaten and it's dinner where you're at, get some food, eat well, stay healthy, meet new people, go to Zoom events, use LinkedIn, and I wish you the best of luck wherever you're at and to wherever you're going. This sort of thing is life-changing, and I want you to just have a good picture of actually what it takes, the time frame, where you end up at, and yeah, that's it. Oh, there's one last question. I'll get it. Is there anyone who is interested in joining an app to connect with others in this field? Please check out Career Karma. Yeah, Career Karma is cool. Good website. And that is all, folks. Signing off from Dallas, Texas. Until next time.
Ini suara dari luar masuk ya katanya. Ada yang kira suara dari luar masuk. Ya beda memang. Kemudian harganya beda. Boleh nggak nambahin itu ya? Nambahin ayolah. Ibu itu. level ekstrim dengan gitu daripada kayak yang pada tangga motor itu ya. Ya, awalnya dia tingginya mau tinggi kurang itunya tangganya. Ini kan tinggi juga kan jadi kurang. Belum minta ngomong itu aja ya, ini udah separuh ini masih ini ya kita kan masalah itu juga. Ya, dengan ketemu istirahat, tak biar itu, coba. minimal ya dong.
Udah ini makanan ini. Ini.